this morning, I think it's pretty obvious what's on my mind. And frankly speaking, it's something that we shouldn't have to be here talking about. I think it's a waste of time having to have to talk about this morning, but here we are. Across our schools yesterday, children were having their sweaters confiscated. Not because they're offensive, not because they are unsafe, not because they are concealing weapons. No. But because they don't carry the right logo. That's why they're being confiscated. They do not carry the right logo. And I wanted to let that sink in for a minute. On a cold morning, where several adults, I recall that morning, Tana, I put on, Monday morning I had on a jumper because I was cold. Yesterday I had on a jacket. I had on an undershirt, a shirt, a tie, a jacket because I was cold. And our children, on that cold morning from yesterday, when the breeze cuts through the thin uniforms and the classroom feels more like a freezer than places of learning, children were being forced to remove the sweaters their parents provided to keep them warm. Sweaters that are thicker. Sweaters that, again, are not offensive. Sweaters that are safe. And sweaters that are not concealing weapons. Sweaters that are actually doing the job. And in some cases, sweaters that actually fit. Because children grow and branded uniforms don't magically expand with them. And instead, our schools, some of them, were insisting that students were to wear the branded sweaters, the thin sweaters, the overpriced sweaters, and the completely inadequate sweaters for what we were facing the other day. And when children don't have them, the alternative was not compassion, it was confiscation. The alternative was not understanding, it was taken away. So what happens next? The children sit in class shivering, unable to focus, distracted, uncomfortable, cold, and I pray God forbid, that some of them got sick. And I would not be surprised, ladies and gentlemen, if someone called into the newsroom throughout the rest of this week to say that a child of theirs whose sweater was confiscated now has the cold or the flu or something of the sort. And for what? A logo? A rule? A rigid idea of compliance that has lost all connection with reality? These branded sweaters are expensive. Many parents are already stretched thin, paying school fees, paying for books, lunches, transportation, and everything else that I might miss. But you parents know what you pay when it comes to raising a child in today's economy. So when a parent chooses to buy a thicker, unbranded sweater, that is not rebellion, it is simply a responsibility. And yet, instead of working with the parents, instead of exercising discretion, instead of applying basic human judgment, I'm not even calling it common sense now, basic human judgment, a prisoner would be allowed to wear a sweater if he were cold. But our children? And some of these schools have doubled down on this do or die and rules or rules mentality. No leeway, no context, and I can't help but say it, no common sense. And this kind of thinking, it does not teach discipline. It does not. What it teaches is obedience without reason. And they think that this is some sort of building of character, when all it does, it builds resentment. That's all it does. And chief of all, it does not have the best interest of the child at heart. Education is about nurtured minds, but we make it about policing clothing at the expense of our children's not only dignity but at this point health. And we cannot continue this system where rules matter more than the children themselves. where policy is enforced so blindly, so coldly, so callously, that a cold child becomes collateral damage. And I'm afraid that what we heard yesterday, is a personification of authority that is not measured by wisdom, but it's more measured by the egos of those who run the schools. Where is the room for judgment? Where's the room for compassion? Where's the room for understanding that uniformity cannot and should not override simple humanity? And yes, it is humanity. A child shivering in their boots from there at school 8 o'clock in the morning till school ends at 2:30 in the afternoon. It's a fly in the face of simple common decency. And if a child is warm, decent, and ready to learn, then that should take the priority. It's not whether a sweater carries a crest, or the sweater carries a particular color today. That's not the case. Because now, if you're choosing logos over the children's lesson, then we're already losing. We're already losing. We cannot be choosing logos in the sake of uniformity over the children's lesson. And yes, it's over their lesson because I am pretty sure that those children learned nothing yesterday. Because if you've ever experienced the cold, you have to focus to try and keep warm. If you've ever experienced the cold, you have to focus to try and keep warm. And that is speaking from an adult's perspective. Imagine more so the children. And I wonder, I wonder, ladies and gentlemen, I wonder. Because you see, I'm not a parent. And I'm this angry about it. Imagine more so the parents who knew that their offspring yesterday was sitting shivering in a classroom for hours. Imagine the parents who, when in contact with the school or at the school, are being told that they're not getting back the sweater until Ash Wednesday and they're confiscating the sweater. Imagine being a parent. What are we supposed to say to the parents? Calm down? Be understanding? If I am this inflamed, and I am not a parent, I can only imagine the parents choosing logo over the children's lesson. It cannot continue. It cannot continue. And what I recognize now, Tana, is that common sense. They've always said it, common sense is not so common. But human decency is also far, far away from many of us. And it is far away from many of the places that should really and truly be nurturing it. That's what's on my mind.